Thank you for watching this Last Mile Profits video. I have great pleasure to follow up on my interview with Andras Lengyel, Vice President of International Business Development, Austrian Post. And Andras is responsible for international development of out-of-home within the organization. Andras, it's really great. I think we have a slightly easier environment, less background noise, and I'm really interested in having this chat with you. Perhaps, Andras, the first thing I'd like to ask is, not many people know this, but Austria Post actually has some really strong credentials with lockers. I know it's not your core area you're responsible for outside of Austria, but what can you tell us about the history of Austria Post with lockers?
Sure. Thank you so much, Marek, to have me back. It's always a pleasure talking to you guys. Just looking back sort of on the history, in Austria, we have had parcel lockers from Keba for more than a decade now, and we have always used them to deposit shipments that we could not deliver, but the growth was actually quite slow compared to other geographies in Europe. Yeah, and direct to out of home was not an issue back in the days, and that has significantly changed, obviously, over the past few years. Now, where I am responsible for is the sort of establishing the out of home network, especially in terms of APMs for our subsidiary landscape throughout Central Eastern Europe and Turkey.
Okay, well, two things I'll add. One is I think you were a little bit coy there because not many people will know that actually Austria and Keba were one of the grandfathers or the godfathers or whatever we want to call it of the locker, because the first lockers were produced, as far as I understand, by Keba and Deutsche Post. A lot has happened since then, but very much that was the initial history. The other thing not many people probably know about is how big Austria Post is within the southeastern European area. You mentioned Turkey, but I understand, Andras, that you have strong business units in the Balkans, certainly from what I remember, Croatia, Slovakia, of course, Turkey, and pretty much most of the other markets. Is that right?
That's correct. So we operate our own subsidiary network across, let's say, from the most western point, which is in Slovenia, all the way to basically Azerbaijan, which is our most fresh acquisition. And we have 11 subsidiaries in 10 countries. I can name them from Slovakia, Hungary, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, Bulgaria, Turkey, and Azerbaijan. And out of home is not at the same maturity level across these countries, but it's becoming more and more important everywhere. This will be my point of view right now.
So let's, because this is all about out of home and lockers, and you guys have a lot of experience and learnings. If you were to think about the key learnings that you've gained setting up networks throughout the region, what would they be?
I would say for us, the learnings from Austria, which we took away, is that this is a very investment heavy network to develop, and the traditional lockers that are connected to the grid, quite large with PC or any other computer running, they require also a lot of pre-work, and the pre-work can also be expressed in another part of the investment. Now, if you look at our landscape, where the countries that I've mentioned, where other entrants are already establishing or have established their presence in the out-of-home market, we need to be very fast and we need to be very convincing with our quality and our reach in terms of the coverage that we can achieve with the newer generation of lockers, which is basically the fully autonomous that do not require groundwork, do not require cabling, do not require internet cabling, so not just power, but internet. So basically you drag and drop an autonomous locker into its final position, and even the final position might not be so final, whereas in the previous days where you put everything down, concrete, base and so on, you were not so flexible in moving them around. If you missed the perfect spot and you realize that maybe in a year or two you're still very easy on moving that locker to a new position.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big advantages of next generation battery pad lockers, that they're much easier to relocate if your locations, should we say, data perhaps wasn't ideal or if something's changed. Tell me one thing, because, from our perspective, it's important to understand, what was important when you were looking for a supplier. Tell us a bit about why you chose the ARKA machine and how things have worked.
Basically, from our learnings in Austria, where I started before, and we have had also a short experience in Slovakia, where we had our own lockers operated 80 pieces for a few years, and then we exited that market. We learned that IT is a key component, and looking at different markets that we want to establish our own network, and the future outlook of adding more and more lockers possibly to this network made us realize that we need to have a strong focus on the IT and trying to put a harmonization, standardization for ourselves into this IT. And since we have in our subsidiary landscape also a subsidiary of a subsidiary, which is a service provider, an IT service provider, it's a subsidiary of Aras Digital, our subsidiary in Turkey. It's called Aras Cargo, which is a subsidiary of Austrian Post. They have a subsidiary. It's called Aras Digital. They are very, very professional and very flexible and understand our business. So this is the perfect match for us to create our own software. So we created, we call it LOS, that is the locker operating system, that is connected to all of our domestic IT systems. And basically this is one connection to any kind of locker manufacturer. So this is a strategic decision where we said that this is how we go into the market. We have our own system. We have LOS that speaks our language, and we require manufacturers to tune to this language in order to talk to us. Yeah, that's not everybody's bottom of their heart to change their firmware or the protocols that they communicate with us, and it takes time, and it's also an investment. At that time, ARKA was the one who was the quickest and best in terms of quality in implementing this communication to us, and that's why we chose ARKA in 2024.
But I presume also the fact that the lockers have at least a declared 10-year battery life. I know that depending upon the external situation, that can vary, but it still seems quite impressive. I guess you also looked at some of the hardware elements.
Exactly. It's a good point, Marek. It was one of the most crucial discussion that we had was around the battery and the battery life, the life or the time of autonomous battery operation. So let's assume the solar panels were to break, then how long does the battery last before we can send someone who replaces the solar panel? And we have had a bumpy ride, not just with ARKA, basically with everybody, because I think that's the key in the R&D of the locker manufacturers, how they can transform this requirement into a working set. And at the end, ARKA could convince us with the solution they offered.
Super. I think it's going to be really interesting to see once you've got a larger number of machines in place, we could perhaps talk again and see what your learnings are. I'm really enthusiastic about next gen machines, and I'm quite interested because they're basically two directions that I can see, two new directions, because the historic direction was long battery life, but very limited features and certainly very, very limited peripherals. The latest developments I can see going in two directions. One is I call it the pit stop version, which is a machine where you just remove and replace the battery locker. And then there's what ARKA has, which is the one with a battery that is enhanced by solar power. So I'm really, really interested. It would be great perhaps to catch up in a year or so and see how things have developed. But one thing, Andras, before we end the video, I'd love to ask you about is, what do you think is going to happen by 2030? Will out of home change because of technology like lockers? What's your sort of personal view on how things will move?
Well, thanks for that, Marek. I think out of home is going to be a surprise for many of us. I'm personally convinced that parcel delivery without offering out of home will become rather niche. Out of home volumes will, in my opinion, reach 50-50 to home delivery, and APMs will have the most significant role. Although I'm also a strong believer that APMs will not 100% substitute PUDOs. I think this is a case-to-case discussion, and there are locations, there are geographies, there are certain target groups that require still PUDOs. That's sort of my opinion. And basically, the projects that we are driving now and managing also centrally from Vienna for the subsidiary landscape is that we are going to play a very, very significant role in the out-of-home delivery in our markets. And I'm very confident that we will be market leaders, and paired with our existing high quality in the parcel business, I think we'll be ranking on the top.
What was music to my ears in terms of the PUDO story, because as you probably know, I'm a big believer in the fact that out of home is all about knowing the right mix between PUDOs and lockers. I always use my military example. It's like an army with either just infantry or tanks. Both of them are suboptimal. If you put the two together, they work very well. And we're in agreement. Interestingly, we had a webinar a couple of years ago, and we asked a lot of experts what they thought would happen within the next 5 or 6 years with out of home. And the majority believed that in the European Union markets, between 40 and 60%, depending on the market, will be out of home. So I think you're right in the middle there. One last question, and this, of course, is your personal opinion. I'm a big fan of the fact that the universal service obligation, which is really expensive to maintain and difficult to maintain, it's going to be hard to keep it tenable with reasonable price. And I believe out of home could be part of the solution. Have you got a view on that?
To be also quite frank on that, I'm a little bit far away from the universal service that we in Austria provide to our domestic clients. But looking at the Nordics and the lessons learned across Europe, I think that there's a good case for certain regions, and also most likely throughout Austria, that will make the case for out-of-home adding or complementing universal service provision.
Well, look, let's see. Time will tell. Andras, it's been a real pleasure. This time we had a great environment. There wasn't too much background noise, and I think we're able to cover everything. Thanks once again for your time, and looking forward to hopefully to catching up at some stage in the future with you again.
Thank you very much, Marek.
Thanks for watching this Last Mile Profits video. For more up-to-date last mile news and analysis, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn.